Hello, on behalf of the Department of Communication Studies at West Virginia University in Morgantown, West Virginia. My name is Dr. Nick Bowman, and I'm going to spend a couple minutes introducing you to the West Virginia University Communication Studies MOOC, or the WVU CommMOOC. I'm hoping that if you're looking at this presentation that you're going to be following along this month, as the month of February 2013 is feature our very first massive open online course. As our first course, I thought I'd spend a couple minutes introducing you to the idea of a MOOC, how the Department of Communication Studies sees the MOOC, and hopefully some ways you can navigate this to make it a good learning experience. So if you can follow with it for about 10 minutes, we'll explain how this works. First, a MOOC is a massive open online course. And it's important to understand a couple elements of this connection. One of the first is that the goals of such a course are really about access and participation. One of the philosophies here is that many of the things that we study at the university in general, and particularly in communication studies, as we deal with sort of the information economy of the 21st century, it can be really hard for people to stay up on trends. Other than what's covered perhaps in the mass media or perhaps discussed online, people can find it difficult to track and understand some of the theories behind our technologies in general, our communication in general, and really the knowledge in general. So the MOOC is designed to give students like yourself access to some of our information. Not everybody can come to Morgantown to study. Not everybody can afford to be in Morgantown to study. And some of the folks in this MOOC are going to be logging in from around the world. And so we'd like to give them a chance to touch base on some of the current trends and events in the study of communication technology, of course, in this case, but it could really be anything. So we're trying to get access to the information, access to putting ourselves as experts in the field in touch with learners and people who are actively engaging in this information. We also look for participation. One of the things that a MOOC recognizes is that oftentimes people like yourself who are actively working in industries can tell us a lot about how communication technology is influencing your behaviors and lives and your economy. So the hope is to bring students like yourselves in contact with professors like ourselves and to have everybody work on sort of an even playing field. So you want to think about this aspect as we go through the MOOC. We're trying to get you information, we're trying to engage you to talk with us about the information. And this is really part of this notion called Web 2.0. It's this notion that the people who use the internet are creators and collaborators on the information, and that all of us combined can really come to understand some of these newer phenomena of study. Another part of a MOOC is that it's scalable. It's designed to fit 1 student or 1 million students. And so we tried to design this in a modular system and that anybody could take the information and get started. And what we hope is that the more people who use the information and share in the discussions, the more folks who access the MOOC and participate in discussions about the MOOC, the better the knowledge gets. It's a general founding principle really of the internet, that data and knowledge gets better as we all interact and use it. I want to talk a little bit about different types of MOOCs, and they're commonly referred to as CMOOC and XMOOC. CMOOC stands for a connectivist type of MOOC that really subscribes to the notion in crowdsourced learning, that the best way to understand phenomenon is to really tap into the people who use it and the people who study it, and to sort of bring those people together. The other one would be more the traditionalist approach. The XMOOC would be a situation in which a lot of faculty and professors and experts might put up a canned course online and then give the students a chance to download those things on their own, where it doesn't focus so much on participation, but it focuses a lot on access barriers and things of that nature. So one of the things I want you to think about as you're going through the MOOC is, what type of MOOC is WVU CommMOOC? Do you think we're approaching this from more of a connectivist style? Do you think we're approaching it more from a traditionalist style? And you might think about some of the ways that might influence your learning. So it's sort of a meta question to think about as we experiment with this technology and as you experiment with this technology. So again, a massive open online course. By massive, we mean scalable. It's a course that can be brought up or down to fit the needs of one person or of an entire culture. It's an open course. It's access upon request. We simply ask that you log in and give us some basic information so we can find out who we're talking to. But then from there, really, anybody can access this information. We're trying to sort of democratize the educational process and really give people from all over the world a chance to at least approach and interact some of these issues. It's online. This course is about the people involved in it and the connections they have to each other. One of the things that makes a MOOC so successful is sort of what I referred to earlier, we can get everybody's opinions involved collectively, and we can really start to hammer at some of these issues. In our case, issues of communication technology and how it might be changing the way we share information. How we share information, how we form relationships, how we learn persuasion strategies and how we convince each other and talk to each other about current events, and finally entertainment processes and how all those things play together. So the more we can bring folks together in this online community, the greater chance we have to access many separate viewpoints that some scholars call the muted viewpoints. These are people who don't often get a chance to participate in the system. So by making this as open as possible, we try to bring those viewpoints to surface, and then all of us can discuss an issue. Finally, of course, it is a course. It's an academic study. There's a central point of study. And in our case, again, it's communication technology and the science behind that. But like any course, and especially an online course, we really, again, push for that discussion element. And so oftentimes throughout the MOOC, you're going to find the faculty doing these basic presentations to get everybody started. And then we're going to hope you get the chance to interact with us down the road and interact with each other and really discuss these issues and apply them to your own daily lives. So the CommMOOC. It's the science of how communication technologies have shaped our social lives. So one of the things that we really look at in the Department of Communication Studies in Morgantown is we're very curious about communication technology, and that is those devices that use a medium, a cell phone, a computer screen, the iPod in your pocket, all of these different technologies that we've started to use to share information. And we have a belief based on the research that we do, based on the interviews that we conduct, and based on our own understanding of social theory and of communication theory, that we're starting to see perhaps a change in how we live our life because we have so much more social information. There's such more opportunity for communication that we simply have more information to go with. We have information on demand. We can access information from people's cell phone numbers to their marital status, to a fight we're having with somebody online, to a friend of ours overseas. And it's not that we couldn't do those things before. It's that now we have a network technology that makes things like space or time irrelevant. And so this MOOC is designed to really introduce people to the science behind these technologies. So many of you use the technology, many of you have an opinion about the technology, and certainly if you read the newspaper and follow trends, we see the influence of Facebook on the election, and we see the influence of Twitter on relationships, and people talk about these things. But we see our job as scientists to really get under the fingernails and sort of play around with what are some of the theories here? Are these technologies new? Are the influences new? And how can you use these things to better your life, to better your workplace environment, to better your relationships? Again, some of the goals we talk about in communication are getting information, forming relationships, working in persuasion, and finally entertaining and leisuring yourself. And so we'll talk a bit about that as we go through the MOOC. And so hopefully this gives you an idea of how we see this particular presentation. So there's going to be 4 weeks. And we're going to start this thing on February 4th of 2013. So if you're listening to this now, it's next week. And the very first discussion is week 1, sponsored by myself, Dr. Nick Bowman. And it's learning to cope with our robot overlords. And what I'm talking about here is this sort of predominant perception that technology has taken over our lives. And so I take sort of a tongue-in-cheek look at, now that we are ruled by our technology, how do we handle that? Now, I don't necessarily believe we are ruled by our technology. In fact, I often think that our technology is merely a tool that we use to accomplish the same human goals we've had since the beginning of humanity. But starting February 4th, 2013, I'll start talking about these things. If you'd like more information on me, you can click on my portrait there. It'll take you to my professional webpage. And starting with today and throughout the MOOC, you're welcome to tweet me at Bowman Spartan, and make sure you use the WVU CommMOOC hashtag. Okay, so week 1 is going to start us off with an introduction to technology and an introduction to our shaping our social lives. Week 2 is going to sponsor Dr. David Westerman. He's going to be speaking starting on the 11th of February 2013. And he's going to talk about discussions of interpersonal relationships, this idea of love at first like. And of course, with Valentine's Day being right around the corner, it's a pretty appropriate conversation to have. So Dr. Westerman's research, you can click on his portrait to learn more about him. He's going to spend a lot of time talking about, can we really fall in love online? Can we really have online relationships? And I think you'll be surprised at some of his commentary and discussion. And we're hoping, with Valentine's Day being that week, that you might be able to engage these things as we move forward. On week 3, starting 18 February 2013, Drs. Alan Goodboy and Dr. Matt Martin will be talking about cyberbullying, which has been a prominent issue in the headlines over the last couple of years. This notion that we can use technology to go after each other, to engage in some of these antisocial behaviors, and we can sort of hide behind the cloak of anonymity. People don't know who we are through the computer. And Drs. Goodboy and Martin will spend a lot of time talking about the social implications of these things, some of the causes of cyberbullying, and how we might be able to better understand the phenomenon so we might be able to prevent it or cope with it in the future. Finally, in week 4, starting 25 February 2013, Dr. Elizabeth Cohen will be speaking to us about technology overload. So one of the things you might feel like you experience oftentimes is that there are so many tools and there are so many technologies that are disposable. They give us so many information, they give us so much content to consume at one time, and it can be very difficult to sift out the useful information from what might be perceived as useless information. Sometimes we're so ambiently aware of our surroundings that we can't pull ourselves out of our social spheres. A lot of folks who work in tech industries talk about how they leave their office and their cell phone goes home with them, and they keep getting emails and they keep getting phone calls, and they can't leave things behind. We get lost in a sea of information, and so Dr. Cohen's going to spend a lot of time talking about that. And you see her Twitter handle there. You can click on her portrait for more information. In fact, for all of these people, you can click on their portraits and look at their Twitter accounts for more information. So we hope that those 4 modules, this idea of coping with technology, and understanding sort of where it comes from and why we use it, understanding this idea of relationships and interpersonal bonds, this notion of cyberbullying and how that might affect the way we form bonds into the future, and how we might cope with the very real world consequences of our virtual actions. And then finally, understanding how technology overload can be overcome and how we can deal with this notion of having all this information. Dr. Westerman constantly says, and I think all of us agree with this, that we have space-age technology, but we have relatively stone-age brains. And so I think a driving focus of this MOOC is really going to be to help explain that process. And by understanding these 4 modules, it should give you sort of a baseline level of information to start working technology more properly and perhaps with more focus into your daily lives. So get at us. Of course, the MOOC can be found right there at CommMOOC.org. All these links are active and you can go to these pages. You can tweet any of the faculty. You can also tweet WVU Comm Studies and just use that hashtag so we know who you are. There's a FAQ, a frequently asked questions page on our MOOC, so if you have questions that perhaps this presentation didn't answer, you can do that there. We also have a SlideShare account you can go to, and that's going to give you a lot of information about contacting us. And finally, you can read about us in the Daily Ananthium, which is the campus newspaper, and you can check out some information about the MOOC, the College of Arts and Sciences. And if you have any stories for yourself, feel free to read those and share them with us. So in closing, a couple tips. Lessons at your leisure. The point of a MOOC is to be able to study on your own pace. Now, some of the faculty will make themselves available for live discussions, often on Twitter, perhaps on the MOOC discussion board. And so, of course, you're invited to come to those live presentations. But the point of a MOOC is to study at your own time. You know, whether it's 5 o'clock in the morning before you go to the gym, maybe it's when you put your children in bed at night, maybe it's on your lunch break at work, or any time in between. Log on your leisure and take care of some of the information and sort of think about the questions you want to ask us and ask each other. We want you to congregate and collaborate. A really big part of a MOOC is bringing everybody together. Again, we have experiences as professors, as scientists, but you also have experiences as humans, as workers, as families, as romantic partners, as friends, as enemies. And we want to hear how you use technology and the questions that you might have on a daily basis. Engage for enlightenment. We hope that you can engage the material to better your understanding of communication technology, recognizing it is a part of our social world, it's a part of our physical world, and how might you be able to better navigate that with some of this basic information. And then finally, this notion of the autotelic process. In some ways, we're doing this because we enjoy it. An autotelic process is one that we engage in basically to be human. Aristotle talked about these in his very first writings on rhetoric. And And it's a, relatedly sort of, head in the clouds notion that sometimes we study for the sake of study. And I might present to you that some of this information might teach you a little more about what it means to be human. It might teach you a little more about the world around you. So in closing, happy MOOCing. We're really excited about this information. We hope you can join us soon, and we'll see you online.